Hey, hey, you know what time it is. Woo! Hold on. Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! Second time's the charm. Ooh. Uh-oh. Hold on, y'all. One sec. Okay. Uh-oh. Okay, we're good. Sorry about that technical difficulty. But hi, welcome to Storytime with Chris. Like I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, maxing, relaxing, chillaxing time, in between time. Anytime you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, science fiction, adventure, fantasy, and many, many more in between. Hi, y'all. It's a beautiful Tuesday. I hope everybody is having a wonderful day, and I hope everybody is doing well. So, we are back with a series of unfortunate events by Lemony Snicket. We are on chapter 12 today, and we only have one more chapter to go before we start our new book. And as always, anytime we complete a book, I tend to go on a little bit of a break. So, after this week, we'll take at least a couple days off, and then we'll go ahead and start the new book. But I hope everybody's having a good time, and without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay. Chapter 12. And no, by the way, I don't own the music in the background. "Welcome aboard," Captain Sham said with a wicked grin that showed his filthy teeth. "I'm happy to see you all. I thought you had been killed when the old lady's house fell off the hill, but luckily my associate told me you had stolen a boat and run away. And you, Josephine, I thought you'd done the sensible thing and jumped out the window." "I tried to do the sensible thing," Aunt Josephine said sourly, "but these children came and got me." Captain Sham smiled. He had expertly steered his sailboat so it was alongside the one the Baudelaires had stolen, and Aunt Josephine and the children had stepped over the swarming leeches to come aboard. With a gurgling whoosh, their own sailboat was overwhelmed with water and quickly sank into the depths of the lake. The lachrymose leeches swam around the sinking sailboat, gnashing their tiny teeth. "Aren't you going to say thank you, orphans?" Captain Sham asked, pointing to the swirling place in the lake where their sailboat had been. "If it weren't for me, all of you would be divided up into the stomachs of those leeches." "If it weren't for you," Violet said fiercely, "we wouldn't be in Lake Lachrymose to begin with." "You can blame that on the old woman," he said, pointing to Aunt Josephine. "Faking your own death was pretty clever, but not clever enough. The Baudelaire fortune, and, unfortunately, the brats who come with it, now belong to me." "Don't be ridiculous," Klaus said. "We don't belong to you, and we never will. Once we tell Mr. Poe what happened, we will send you to jail." "Is that so?" Captain Sham said, turning the sailboat around and sailing toward Damascus dock. His one visible eye was shining brightly as if he were telling a joke. "Mr. Poe will send me to jail, eh? Why, Mr. Poe is putting finishing touches on your adoption papers this very moment. In a few hours, you orphans will be Violet, Klaus, and Sonny Sham." "Nihab!" Sonny shrieked, which meant, "I'm Sonny Baudelaire, and I will always be Sonny Baudelaire, unless I decide for myself to legally change my name." "When we explain that you forced Aunt Josephine to write that note," Violet said, "Mr. Poe will rip up those adoption papers into 1,000 pieces." "Mr. Poe won't believe you," Captain Sham said, chuckling. "Why should he believe 3 runaway pipsqueaks who would go around stealing boats?" "Because we're telling the truth!" Klaus cried. "Truth schmoot," Captain Sham said. "If you don't care about something, one way to demonstrate your feelings is to say the word and then repeat the word with the letter schm, S-C-H-M, replacing the first real letters. Somebody who didn't care about dentist, for instance, could say dentist schmentis, but only a despicable person like Captain Sham would care about the truth. Truth schmooth," he said again. I think Mr. Poe is more likely to believe the owner of a respectable sailboat rental place who went out in the middle of a hurricane to rescue 3 ungrateful boat thieves.
We only stole the boat, Violet said, to retrieve Aunt Josephine from her hiding place so she could tell everyone about your terrible plan.
But nobody will believe the old woman either, Captain Sham said impatiently. Nobody believes a dead woman.
Are you blind in both eyes? Klaus asked. Aunt Josephine isn't dead.
Captain Sham smiled again and looked out at the water. Just a few yards away, the water was rippling as the lachrymose leeches swam toward Captain Sham's sailboat. After searching every inch of the Baudelaire's boat and failing to find any food, the leeches had realized they'd been tricked and were once again following the scent of bananas still lingering on Aunt Josephine. She's not dead. Yet. Captain Sham said in a terrible voice and took a step towards her.
"Oh no," she said. Her eyes were wide with fear. "Don't throw me overboard," she pleaded. "Please!"
You're not going to reveal my plan to Mr. Poe, Captain Sham said, taking another step toward the terrified woman, because you will be joining your beloved Ike at the bottom of the lake.
"No, she won't," Violet said, grabbing a rope. "I will steer us to shore before you can do anything about it."
"I'll help," Klaus said, running to the back and grabbing the tiller.
"Eagle!"
Sonny shrieked, which meant something along the lines of, "And I'll guard Aunt Josephine." She crawled in front of the Baudelaire's guardian and bared her teeth at Captain Sham.
"I promise not to say anything to Mr. Poe," Aunt Josephine said desperately. "I'll go someplace and hide away and never show my face. You can tell him I'm dead. You can have the fortune. You can have the children. Just don't throw me to the leeches."
The Baudelaires looked at their guardian in horror.
"You're supposed to be caring for us," Violet told Aunt Josephine in astonishment. "Not putting us up for grabs."
Captain Sham paused and seemed to consider Aunt Josephine's offer. "You have a point," he said. "I don't necessarily have to kill you. People just have to think that you're dead."
"I'll change my name," Aunt Josephine said. "I'll dye my hair. I'll wear colored contact lenses. I'll go very, very far away. Nobody will ever hear from me."
"But what about us, Aunt Josephine?" Klaus asked in horror. "What about us?" "Be quiet, orphan," Captain Sham snapped. The lachrymose leeches reached the sailboat and began tapping on the wooden side. "The adults are talking. Now, old woman, I wish I could believe you, but you had been a very trustworthy person."
"Haven't been," Aunt Josephine corrected, wiping a tear from her eye.
"What?" Captain Sham said.
"You made a grammatical error," Aunt Josephine said. "You said, but you hadn't been a very trustworthy person. But you should have said, you haven't been a very trustworthy person." Captain Sham's one shiny eye blinked and his mouth curled up in a terrible smile. "Thank you for pointing that out," he said, and took one last step toward Aunt Josephine. Sonny growled at him, and he looked down and in one swift gesture moved his peg leg and knocked Sonny to the other end of the boat. "Let me make sure I completely understand the grammatical lesson," he said to the Baudelaire's trembling guardian as if nothing had happened. "You wouldn't say Josephine Ann Whistle had been thrown overboard to the leeches, because that would be incorrect. But if you said Josephine Ann Whistle has been thrown overboard to the leeches, that would be all right with you." "Yes," Aunt Josephine said. No.
But Aunt Josephine never got to say what she meant. Captain Sham faced her, and using both hands pushed her over the side of the boat. With a little gasp and a big splash, she fell into the waters of Lake Lachrymose.
"Aunt Josephine!" Violet cried. "Aunt Josephine!"
Klaus leaned over the side of the boat and stretched his hand out as far as he could. Thanks to her 2 life jackets, Aunt Josephine was floating on top of the water, waving her hands in the air as the leeches swam toward her. But Captain Sham was already pulling at the ropes of the sail, and Klaus couldn't reach her. "You fiend!" he shouted at Captain Sham. You evil fiend!" "That's no way to talk to your father," Captain Sham said calmly. Violet tried to tug a rope out of Captain Sham's hand.
"Move the sailboat back," she shouted. "Turn the boat around."
"Not a chance," he replied smoothly. "Wave goodbye to the old woman, orphans. You'll never see her again."
Klaus leaned over as far as he could. "Don't worry, Aunt Josephine," he called, but his voice revealed that he was very worried himself. The boat was already quite a ways from Aunt Josephine, and the orphans could only see the white of her hands as she waved them over the dark water. "She has a chance," Violet said quietly to Klaus as they sailed toward the dock. "She has those life jackets, and she's a strong swimmer." "That's true," Klaus said, his voice shaky and sad. "She's lived by the lake her whole life. Maybe she knows of an escape route." "Le gros," Sunny said quietly, which meant, "All we can do is hope." Excuse me. The three orphans huddled together, shivering in cold and fear as Captain Sham sailed the boat by himself. They didn't dare do anything but hope. Their feelings for Aunt Josephine were all a tumble in their minds. The Baudelaires had not really enjoyed most of their time with her, not because she cooked horrible cold meals or chose presents for them they didn't like or always corrected the children's grammar, but because she was so afraid of everything that she made it impossible to really enjoy anything at all. And the worst of it was, Aunt Josephine's fear had made her a bad guardian. A guardian is supposed to stay with children and keep them safe. But Aunt Josephine had run away at the first sign of danger. A guardian is supposed to help children in times of trouble, but Aunt Josephine practically had to be dragged out of the Curdle Cave when they needed her. And a guardian is supposed to protect children from danger. But Aunt Josephine had offered the orphans to Captain Sham in exchange for her own safety. But despite all of Aunt Josephine's faults, the orphans still cared about her. She had taught them many things, even if most of them were boring. She had provided a home, even if it was cold and unbearable to withstand hurricanes, and the children knew that Aunt Josephine, like the Baudelaires themselves, had experienced some terrible things in her life. So as their guardian faded from view, and the lights of Damascus Dock approached closer and closer, Violet, Klaus, and Sunny did not think Aunt Josephine Schmosephine. They thought, "We hope Aunt Josephine is safe." Captain Sham sailed the boat right up to the shore and tied it expertly to the dock. "Come along, you little idiots," he said, and led the Baudelaires to the tall meadow gate with the glistening spikes on top, where Mr. Poe was waiting with his handkerchief in his hand and a look of relief on his face. Next to Mr. Poe was the Bordignac. Bordignian creature who gazed at them with a triumphant expression on his or her face.
"You're safe," Mr. Poe said. "Thank goodness. We were so worried about you. When Captain Sham and I reached the Ann Whistle home and saw that it had fallen into the sea, we thought you were done for." "It is lucky my associate told me that they had stolen a sailboat," Captain Sham told Mr. Poe. "The boat was nearly destroyed by Hurricane Herman and by a swarm of leeches. I rescued them just in time."
"He did not!" Violet shouted. "He threw Aunt Josephine into the lake. We have to go and rescue her."
"The children are upset and confused,"
Captain Sham said, his eyes shining. "As their father, I think they need a good night's sleep." "He's not our father!" Klaus shouted. "He's Count Olaf, and he's a murderer! Please, Mr. Poe, alert the police. We have to save Aunt Josephine."
"Oh, dear," Mr. Poe said, coughing into his handkerchief. "You certainly are confused, Klaus. Aunt Josephine is dead, remember? She threw herself out the window."
No, Violet said. "Her suicide note had a secret message in it." Klaus decoded the note, and it said Curdled Cave. Actually, it said apostrophe Curdled Cave, but the apostrophe was just to get our attention.
"You're not making any sense," Mr. Poe said. "What cave? What apostrophe?"
"Klaus," Violet said, "show Mr. Poe the note."
"You can show it to him in the morning," Captain Sham said in a falsely soothing tone. "You need a good night's sleep. My associate will take you to my apartment while I stay here and finish the adoption paperwork with Mr. Poe."
"But," Klaus said.
"But nothing," Captain Sham said. "You're very distraught, which means upset."
"I know what it means," Klaus said. "Please listen to us," Violet begged Mr. Poe. "It's a matter of life or death. Please just take a look at the note."
"You can show it to him," Captain Sham said, his voice rising in anger. "In the morning. Now please follow my associate to my minivan and go straight to bed." "Hold on a minute, Captain Sham," Mr. Poe said. "If it upsets the children so much, I'll take a look at the note. It'll only take a moment."
"Thank you," Klaus said in relief, and reached into his pocket for the note. But as soon as he reached inside, his face fell in disappointment. And I'm sure you can guess why. If you place a piece of paper in your pocket and then soak yourself in a hurricane, the piece of paper, no matter how important it is, will turn into a soggy mess. Klaus pulled a damp lump out of his pocket, and the orphans looked at the remains of Aunt Josephine's note. You could scarcely tell that it had been a piece of paper, let alone read the note or the secret it contained. This was the note, Klaus said, holding it to Mr. Poe. You'll just have to take our word for it that Aunt Josephine was still alive. And she might still be alive, Violet cried. Please, Mr. Poe, someone to rescue her.
Oh, my children,
Mr. Poe said.
You're so sad and worried, but you don't have to worry anymore. I've always promised to provide for you, and I think Captain Sham will do an excellent job of raising you. He has a steady business and doesn't seem likely to throw himself out of a window. It's obvious he cares for you very much. Why, he went out alone in the middle of a hurricane to search for you.
The only things he cares about, Klaus said bitterly, is our fortune.
Why, that's not true, Captain Sham said. I don't want a penny of your fortune, except, of course, to pay for the sailboat you stole and wrecked.
Mr. Poe frowned and coughed into his handkerchief.
Well, that's a surprising request, he said, but I suppose that can be arranged. Now, children, please go to your new home while I make the final arrangements with Captain Sham. Perhaps we'll have time for breakfast tomorrow before I head back to the city.
Please, Violet cried. Please, won't you listen to us? Please, Klaus cried. Please, won't you believe us? Sonny did not say anything. Sonny had not said anything for a long time, and if her siblings hadn't been so busy trying to reason with Mr. Poe, they would have noticed that she wasn't even looking up to watch everyone talking. During this whole conversation, Sonny was looking straight ahead, and if you are a baby, this means looking at people's legs. The leg she was looking at was Captain Sham's. She wasn't looking at his right leg, which was perfectly normal, but at his peg leg. She was looking at the stump of dark polished wood attached to his left knee with a curved metal hinge and concentrating very hard. It may surprise you to learn that at this very moment, Sonny resembled the famous Greek conqueror Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great lived more than 2,000 years ago, and his last name was not actually the Great. The Great was something that he forced people to call him by bringing a bunch of soldiers into their land and proclaiming himself king. Besides invading other people's countries and forcing them to do whatever he said, Alexander the Great was famous for something called the Gordian Knot. The Gordian Knot was a fancy knot tied in a piece of rope by a king named Gordius. Gordius said that if Alexander could untie it, he could rule the whole kingdom. But Alexander, who was too busy conquering places to learn how to untie knots, simply drew his sword and cut the Gordian Knot in two. This was cheating, of course, but Alexander had too many soldiers for Gordius to argue, and soon everybody in Gordium had to bow down to you-know-who the Great. Ever since then, a difficult problem can be called a Gordian knot, and if you solve the problem in a simple way, even if the way is rude, you are cutting the Gordian knot. The problem the Baudelaire orphans were experiencing could certainly be called a Gordian knot because it looked impossible to solve. The problem, of course, was that Captain Sham's despicable plan was about to succeed, and the way to solve it was to convince Mr. Poe of what was really going on. But with Aunt Josephine thrown in the lake and her note a ruined lump of wet paper, Violet and Klaus were unable to convince Mr. Poe of anything. Sonny, however, stared at Captain Sham's peg leg and thought of a simple, if rude, way of solving the problem. As all the taller people argued and paid no attention to Sonny, the littlest Baudelaire crawled as close as she could to the peg leg, opened her mouth, and bit down as hard as she could. Luckily for the Baudelaires, Sonny's teeth were as sharp as the sword of Alexander the Great, and Captain Sham's peg leg split right in half with a crack. She made everybody look down. As I'm sure you've guessed, the peg leg was fake, and it split open to reveal Captain Sham's real leg, pale and sweaty from knee to toes. But it was neither the knee nor the toes that interested everyone. It was the ankle. For there on the pale and sweaty skin of Captain Sham was the solution to their problem. By biting the peg leg, Sonny had cut the Gordian knot, for as the wooden pieces of fake leg fell to the floor of Damascus dock, everyone could see a tattoo of an eye. And that is where we will end for today. We have one more chapter left and then we're done, y'all. Like I always say, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for stopping by. I love you all, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.